Hello, everyone. My name is Jackson Dowdell, and today I'm going to be conducting a human factors analysis on a helicopter crash that happened in Hawaii. But before I get to that, I do want to talk about my goal in this presentation. Now, it is simple. I just want to highlight, discuss, and offer solutions to the errors in judgment that occurred during this accident. Additionally, I will be analyzing this accident using Jensen's design model, the Swiss cheese model, and the pair model. So, what happened? Well, according to the National Transportation Safety Board, now this is where I got all of this information from. They have an entire article describing the accident in detail, and so I will be referencing and reading most of this part from that website. On December 26, 2019, at about 4:57 Hawaii Standard Time, a seven-seat helicopter operated by Safari Aviation Incorporated as a commercial air tour flight encountered instrument meteorological conditions and collided into terrain in a remote wooded area near Kekaha, Hawaii, on the island of Kauai. The pilot and the six passengers were fatally injured, and the helicopter was completely destroyed. Now, the weather on Kauai had been favorable for tours, but later on, low clouds and rain began moving on shore from the northwest, which was atypical. And this affected many spots on the tour route, including exactly where the accident of the flight uh, happened. At least, at a minimum, three other tour pilots saw the adverse weather and decided to divert their tours away from it. Now, the accident pilot here, however, decided to continue his tour into deteriorating weather, eventually losing adequate visual references before the helicopter struck terrain. So when he crashed, he was blind, essentially. Now, I want to analyze this first by using the Swiss cheese method. So, what is the Swiss cheese method? It's basically a way to analyze and structure a corporation or operation. The holes in one layer are counteracted by the holes in the next layer, at least in theory. Sometimes a problem slips through all of the holes of the slices of Swiss cheese, causing an astronomical accident, much like what we are discussing today. Now, the first layer to be penetrated was protocols, as there were no proper protocols to follow in the instance of an unexpected storm. So there was no guidance from upper management or the leaders of the company on a united front of what we should do if there is weather on your route. Second, there were no tools on the helicopter to equip them for proper flying in storm. So they did not have proper communication with dispatch or with ground control in order to communicate of where they were and what they were experiencing. Lastly, there was no weather oversight by the organizations, leading to the pilots having to make decisions on their own. With all of that said, how does the DECIDE model look with this situation? Well, the DECIDE model stands for D, detect; E, estimate; C, choose; I, identify; D, do; E, evaluate. This is essentially a way that people can make the best choice possible in any given situation. If you follow these steps, you're probably going to make the right decision. So I wanted to kind of compare this to the decisions made by the pilot for this flight and see how they did. Now, sadly, the pilot did not pass the decide model. He essentially failed every step, making errors in judgment the entire way. He has failed, especially the do step, which is essentially doing what is best for everyone, doing the best option possible given the circumstances. Instead of assessing the terrain for safety, evaluating the different choices to make, keeping in mind the safety of all passengers on board, and choosing to not fly in the hazardous conditions, the pilot chose to continue despite all the signs of danger. Now, with that, according to the pair model, it stands for people who do the job, environment in which they work, actions they perform, and resources necessary to complete the job. Now, sadly, again, the pilot does not seem to pass the pair model. He did not successfully pass any of the steps. First, let's start with people. The pilot was not able to see due to the storms, thus making it so that the terrain was virtually unseeable. Secondly, environment. The weather had the company's the weather and the company structure. Both worked in tandem to make it so that an accident was more likely to happen. This kind of relates back to the Swiss cheese model or method, where these two holes just so happen to line up, even though they're on different layers, so that one actually accident can just fly straight through it. And I think this is a situation where that happened here as well. Third, we have actions, which is the pilot did not have the skill or attitude requirements to succeed in the given action. So maybe he felt a sense of, oh, I can do this. I'm skilled enough. I'm talented enough to do this. And maybe he was. Maybe the storm was more intense than he had expected or than he had experienced before. We just don't know. But he simply did not make the right choice given the circumstances. And lastly, and I would say this is the most important part of this aspect, resources. The pilot and company did not have the appropriate tools to fly in dangerous conditions. The pilots often flew with sight only. The company also did not have any systems or protocols in place to prevent these situations from happening. Now, next, I want to talk about the ways that this accident is resembled from our talks in our class. This accident aligns quite significantly with what we have talked about in class. It reminds me a lot of the 12 factors that we've talked about of human error, right? It reminds me of lack of awareness, bad norms, lack of resources, lack of awareness, just to name a few. I think a lot of these were present not only in the pilot's decisions, but also in the company's structure, allowing for a lot of these things to happen. Lastly, there was simply not enough feedback from management and directors. In class, we've talked so much about how important feedback is and how important guidance is. And if you don't have higher ups administrating and covering their bases with all the happenings of the company, I think you tend to find these things where the employee is making decisions that is not theirs to make because that's too weighty of a decision. I think that that is what's happening here. Now, with all of that said, I do have some recommendations. Firstly, I would recommend that Safari Aviation Incorporated, who conducts these guided flying tours in Hawaii, needs to develop a protocol system making it mandatory to not fly in weather that helicopters are unequipped to fly in. Now, this is very similar to the website that I talked about from the National Transportation Safety Board. They recommend a lot of the same things. And so I'm kind of emulating that, but also I think just common sense would also lead to this. Second, the base command needs to have proper equipment to track, support, and guide their helicopters, whether the weather is fair or poor. Later on in the article, they actually talk about how there was no communication devices between command and the helicopters, and so I think that that is something that they would definitely need to implement. And lastly, all helicopters, as soon as possible, must be equipped with the proper equipment to handle hazardous conditions such as rain, snow, storms, high winds, or fog, or whatever other kind of somewhat dangerous or impeding weather that the island will see. Now, here are my works that I've cited for this. Thank you so much for listening to my presentation.